Assalamu alaikum. So today we're going to start chapter number 24. I would like to talk about the first of the Maxwell's four equations. The first equation is generally referred to by the name Gauss's law, in honor of one of the most brilliant prodigies in mathematics and physics, Carl Friedrich Gauss. However, before I discuss the Gauss's law, I would like to talk about the meaning of flux. Suppose I have a charge, a positive charge, and it's a point charge. I know that the field around this is spherically symmetric. So I can stand anywhere around this charge, and if I am at a particular radius from the charge, I will feel the same electric field. The electric force on myself, if I were a test charge, would be the same. It doesn't depend whether I stand here or I stand here. If I'm at a constant radius from the charge, I feel the same field. So this is what is meant by spherically symmetric. Now if I have a point charge, I know that at a radius, some radius r, the electric field is pointing radially outwards. So if I were to plot the electric field vectors, they would look something like this. All of these vectors have the same length because along this spherical shell or this surface that is at a constant radius from the point charge, the electric field is constant. The electric field, however, would be different at some other radius. So the electric field at a larger distance would be smaller because the field falls off as 1 over r squared. This is something we learned from the Coulomb's law. So if I were to plot the electric field at this radius from the point charge, I will still get an electric field that is radially outwards, but the arrows will be shorter, representing smaller magnitudes of the electric field. But still the electric field at a fixed radius is always pointing radially outwards. It's along the radius, which means that if I connect this point with the point charge, this line segment represents the radius and it's normal to the tangent to the circle at this point. And this electric field is in the same direction as the radius. This is what is meant by pointing radially outwards. And if this were a negative charge, this field would point radially inwards. At any distance r, I know that the electric field, which is a vector, according to Coulomb's law, is given by 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught q over r squared. I have to specify a direction as well. So let's call this the unit vector r. Now the unit vector r here is pointing in a different direction than the unit vector here. All of these pink arrows are pointing in different directions at different points. But at each point, the pink arrow is along the radius. So this unit vector r changes its direction with different points. Okay? But in each case, it's along the radius. Fine? Any questions up to this point? Now these electric field lines, this is just one representation of an electric field. Draw arrows at every point. Since these arrows represent vectors, therefore this is a vector field. Likewise, I can have a dipole. For example, a positive charge and a negative charge separated by a certain distance. This dipole would also produce an electric field in its vicinity. So if I were to plot the electric field, it would look something like this. The electric fields will point from the positive charge, they will end on the negative charge. Now what I am doing is instead of plotting arrows, discrete arrows, I am connecting all of these arrows by straight lines. So I can connect these arrows by straight lines. I can draw a picture like this. So these are outwards projecting spokes, like the spokes of a wheel. So these lines, these continuous lines is another representation of electric fields. I can either draw arrows at discrete points or I can draw discrete, I can draw continuous lines. And the spacing between these lines represents how much electric field do I have. Near the charge, the field lines are bunched together. So one would say that the field is higher in the vicinity of the charge. As I move further away from the charge, the field lines separate out. They part ways. They are further apart. So the field, electric field is smaller here. So there are two ways of representing the electric field, either by discrete arrows at discrete points or by continuous lines, and I can put arrows to represent the direction on these lines. Now if I use this second scheme, the electric field into a dipole would look something like this. So the electric fields are going to twist from the positive charge to the negative charge. Alright. So this is a representation of an electric field due to a dipole. I can alternatively, instead of these continuous lines, draw vectors, small arrows that represent the direction of the electric field. For example, here the direction of the electric field will be this tangent to these lines. Here the direction of the electric field will be tangent to this electric field line. So I can fill up space either by these continuous lines or by arrows. Both of them represent the same field. They are different visual representations of the field. So a field can exist inside space due to a distribution of charges. That field is a vector, and it depends upon where you are in space. So it depends upon the position vector. Where are you in space? The electric field will have a particular value and a particular direction at that point R, at that position vector R in space. Now suppose I would like to talk about flux. Suppose I have a general electric field in space pointing in some arbitrary direction. The magnitude is changing, so the field is variable. It's different at different points in space. If I were to draw a field lines that are equally spaced at all points throughout space. So the electric field here is the same as the electric field here. It's the same here. So in this region of space, the electric field doesn't change. Such a field is called a uniform field. We learn about uniform fields. However, this is a non-uniform field that I draw, because the spacing between the electric field lines is variable and the direction is also changing. So if I have this electric field in space, ER, and the field doesn't change with time, so it's a static field. We're talking about electrostatics here. I can draw an arbitrary surface, say a pear-shaped balloon. It's a hypothetical surface. This surface may not correspond to physical object, but in my imagination or visualization, I can draw a surface that is three-dimensional and that's placed inside the space. Now the question I would like to ask is, how many field lines pierce through this surface? This surface could be closed. A closed surface has an inside and an outside. It can also be a plane, like a sheet of rubber, a plane of paper, a piece of paper that doesn't have an inside and an outside. It's two-dimensional. However, I can have three-dimensional surfaces as well. So in each of these cases, I would like to ask the question, how many electric field lines pierce this surface? Yes? Not necessary. Not necessary. This is the question that I would like to pose. How many field lines pierce this surface? Now let me give you a simple example. I have a river and water is flowing inside the river, and the water is flowing throughout this width of the river with uniform velocity. So let's draw a vector field for the velocity. Since the field is uniform, I would like to draw arrows each of these arrows is of the same length, it's pointing in the same direction. The length of these arrows is constant along the width of the river and it's constant along the length of the river. This is what a uniform field means. So there is water flowing inside a river, and what each arrow represents is, at this particular point, the particle of water has a certain velocity which is pointing from left to right, and its magnitude is represented by the length of this arrow. This particle has the same velocity, same direction, same magnitude. So this represents a uniform field, but now it's a velocity vector field. Velocity is also a vector, so it's a velocity field instead of an electric field. This is something that is easy to visualize. So here we're talking about a velocity field. Now suppose I have a hypothetical plane, and this plane is perpendicular to the velocity. And let me draw this plane like this. Now this is a vertical plane and the velocity vector is normal to this plane. This plane may not be physically present, so it's just a figment of our imagination. We draw a hypothetical plane that is perpendicular to the velocity vector. The area of this plane, suppose I denote this by capital A. Now of course there is a certain volume of liquid that is passing through this hypothetical plane per unit time. Could anyone tell me what that volume is going to be? If v is the velocity here, the v is the velocity all along the surface of this plane. So all the particles that are hitting this plane are hitting the plane with a velocity v, and the area of this plane is A. So could anyone tell me what is the volume of liquid in cubic meters that traverses this plane per unit time? Sorry? Times t. Alright, so per unit time, the amount of liquid that pierces this surface is area of the surface A times the speed, the v, the magnitude of the velocity. This speed has units of meters per second. This area has units of meter square. So A times V has units of meter cube per second. So it's the volume of liquid, the amount of liquid that pierces this plane, this two-dimensional plane per unit time. In other words, if all the water here was colored blue, the water that pierces this plane, if I color it blue, then after 1 second, if I make a volume, if I take a snapshot after 1 second, I can draw a tank of blue liquid. This tank has volume AV meters cube, and this is the total amount of volume that has crossed this surface in 1 second. So I can draw a tank, a hypothetical tank of volume AV cubic meters that has traversed this surface in 1 second. Correct? So this amount of volume that passes through this surface per unit time is called the flux associated with the velocity field. It's the flux of water. Right? It's the flux associated with the velocity of the water in the river stream. This is called flux. How much volume passes through this hypothetical surface per unit time? And how do you find it? You just multiply the area of this surface with the velocity vector field. Now suppose I have another situation. I take the same river, the same flow pattern, and I draw the same surface of area A meter square, but now I orient this surface differently. Instead of placing this surface vertically, I now choose to place this surface, the same area, horizontally. The area is still A meter square. Now what is the flux that pierces this surface? 0. There is no volume that flows across this surface. So the flux associated with this surface is 0. Therefore, one would imagine that simply taking the product of the velocity with the area is not sufficient. One has to consider the relative orientation of the velocity and the area. Alright, even though the velocity here is v, here it's also v, here it's also v, so along the length of this surface and along the width of the surface, it's still v. But still, there is no volume of liquid that is piercing this surface. Nothing is going through. It's skimming with the surface, no doubt, but it's not going through the surface. So the flux through this surface is 0, even though this plane has an area. Even though there is a velocity vector field which is existent, it's not 0. There is a velocity vector field, but despite there being a velocity vector field and an area, the flux through it is 0. Now let's take an intermediate situation. The same river bed, the same flow pattern. These arrows represent the velocity vector field. Now the area is oriented in between, in an intermediate fashion between this horizontal orientation and this vertical orientation. It's oriented something like perhaps this. It's the same area. Same amount of area, A meter square. But now it's at an angle. And this angle, suppose, is between the velocity vector field and a normal to the surface, right? So if I draw a surface and I draw a normal to the surface, this normal to the surface represents what the orientation of this plane. Alright? So I have this plane. If I draw a normal to this surface, it means I have identified the direction of the plane. The plane is horizontal because the normal is vertical. If I take this plane, the normal to this plane is horizontal, which means that the surface is vertical. So by looking at the normal to a surface, I can tell what the direction of the surface is, what's the orientation of the surface. So this surface is making a certain angle with respect to the velocity vector field. Let's call that angle theta. Now is this angle the same throughout the surface? ये एंगल एक सा है, बिल्कुल एक सा है. यहाँ पर भी यही एंगल है, यहाँ पर भी यही एंगल है. हर जगह इस सरफेस पर एंगल थीटा ही है, and it's constant. At every point on the surface, the velocity at that point makes the same angle with the normal to the surface at that point, because the velocity is uniform. Now I would like to find out the flux through this surface. The flux through this surface, could anyone tell me what the flux is going to be? आप बताएं क्या होगा फ्लक्स इस सरफेस में? जी, AB कोसाइन थीटा, VA कोसाइन थीटा. Let me represent this flux by phi. So the flux through this surface is V times A times cosine theta. Now I can generalize this. Is this a scalar? Yes, it's a scalar, it's not a vector, even though velocity in itself is a vector. So I have to, what about area? Here I have defined a normal to the area. So I have defined a direction to the area. So I can treat area to be a vector. So if I take the area vector, I can define its magnitude to simply be the area of the plane. and I can define a unit normal to the surface, say n. Now this n hat doesn't have its magnitude is 1 and it's just pointing normal to the surface. So I have defined an area vector. So this quantity, the flux, comes out as V dotted with A. Alright. So this is the definition of the flux of any vector field passing through an area A vector A. Now suppose I have this situation G. If I take this to be the angle, and if the river flows in the opposite direction as well, river flows in the same direction, alright. So if I define this to be the unit normal, well, there is some ambiguity in how you can define it either through this or you can define it through this. In this case, the angle will be between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. The cosine of such an angle is negative, so the flux will be negative. So according to your definition of the area, the flux is going to be negative. If that doesn't harm the result. Okay. Alright, now let's consider this scenario again. Now we don't have a plane surface, rather we have something like a balloon. Okay, and it's a three-dimensional surface. Let me redraw that figure. It's always nice to have bigger and better sketches in this course. I draw an electric field in space I draw a balloon-shaped surface or a pear-shaped surface. It's three-dimensional. Surfaces can be two-dimensional. In a two-dimensional surface like this, you can be ambiguous about the direction of the area vector because there is no inside and outside. But for a three-dimensional closed surface, there is an inside and an outside. Okay? Now, if you look at this three-dimensional surface, I would like to find out the flux phi through this surface. And now I'm not talking about the velocity vector field, I'm talking about the electric field. What is the electric flux through this surface? This is the question I pose to myself and to you. Okay? Now what I would like to do is, I would like to divide this surface. Now it's a surface, remember it's not a volume, it's just a surface. We're just talking about a volume and the outer surface of this volume. So we're talking about surface, not the volume. For example, this object is a volume. There's matter inside this object, inside this box. But I'm just talking about the outer surface. Surface means something that doesn't have a thickness. It's just the outer surface, the outer skin of this box. Okay, that is what is meant by a surface. Okay? So this is a surface in 3 dimensions, and I would like to find out how much flux, electric flux, pierces this surface. How much flux cuts through this surface. Now what I would like to do, I would like to divide this surface into small areas. Let me highlight one such small patch. It's a patch. ठीक है? इस पहिए रबर के पहिए के ऊपर आप एक पंक्चर लगाते हैं, जब वो पंक्चर एक छोटा पैच है पहिए के ऊपर. So this is a patch. Everything is hypothetical. I'm not doing anything physical. I'm not performing an experiment. It's just the figment of my imagination. It's just my visualization. So I pick up a small area which I've highlighted for convenience. Now this small area, suppose the area of this patch is delta representing smallness A1. Now there is some electric field at this point. Okay, There's electric field everywhere, so there has to be some value, some direction of the electric field on this patch. I assume that this patch is very small, so I don't have to worry about variations of electric field on this patch. If this area is small enough, the field will almost be uniform on this area, right? If the field is changing drastically in space, I have to make the patches smaller. But I take the patch small enough, assuming that the electric field is uniform on this small patch. Suppose the electric field at this patch is represented by a vector and it's E1. Now where do I take the electric field on this patch? I am at the liberty of choosing whatever point I like. I can choose the electric field at the midpoint, at any other point on the perimeter, anywhere I like. But if I make this patch smaller, my liberty decreases. Okay? So I make this patch small enough, and that's why I put this delta here. Now the electric flux through this small patch is given by a dot product of this electric field and an area vector. But I have to define an area vector. The area vector has a magnitude delta A1. It must also have a direction. I represent that direction by N1 hat. Okay? Or I can compress and write this as delta A1 vector, right? A1 itself is a vector. And what's the direction of this vector? Now this is an area surface. I take the direction to be normal to the patch and pointing outwards. This is a convention. Okay? I take the direction of the area vector to be pointing outwards. Okay? And normal to this patch. So there is an area vector that's pointing radially outwards. And it is represented by delta A1. So what is the flux through this small patch? Abatan, what's the flux through this small patch? Dot product between delta A1. So the flux through this small patch, through this small segment is E1 dotted with delta A1. I can draw another patch. Here, the electric field is going to point in some other direction. Suppose it's pointing in this direction. The normal is pointing in some other direction. So this is the electric field at patch number 2, and this is the area vector at patch number 2. So the flux through this patch is going to be E2 dot product with delta A2. Likewise, I can subdivide this surface into a large number of patches, and each patch is really small. For each patch, I define an area and find the electric field on that patch. So I can add up all of these fluxes, and as a result, I will get the total flux to the surface. So if I keep on adding these values, plus E3 dotted with delta A3, both being vectors, all the way dA, and I integrate over the area of this surface. So this is how I define the flux through the surface. And it's just equal to the number of lines passing through the surface. We have to integrate over the entire area. So let's look at some practical problems in which we need to define the limits. So this is a really general result. You take the electric field at any point, take its dot product with the area vector at that point. So remember, इस बात को तवज्जो से देखें. This is a local dot product. Local means it's defined at a point. This is something local that may change from point to point in space. So you find out this dot product at all points of interest and then integrate over the area, which means that you sum up over all the points. So this is a local dot product. E is a local field at some point, and this field is going to change from point to point. So you take the dot product of the field at some point with the area vector at that point and integrate. Now let's look at a few practical examples. Yes. Up. No, it's not constant, it's changing. So what I am doing is what I need to do. I take the dot product of the electric field. Now this I represents the electric field at patch I. Right? Now this is changing from patch to patch. Isn't it? This subscript I tells you that the field is different on this patch, it's different here, it's different here, it's different here. So I take the dot, I just focus on one patch. I take the dot product of the electric field on that patch with the area of that patch and sum up over all the patches. So I'm taking into account the variation of the electric field. I'm not assuming the electric field to be constant. Does that answer your question? It's very important to understand this. Alright. Now, is this electric field the same as this field? Up then? Yes or no? No. These fields are all different. E1 is different from E2, E3, En because the electric field is changing in space. But for each point, so I first take patch number 1. This is patch number 1. I take the electric field at this patch and find its dot product with the area of this patch. So I take into account what the electric field is at this patch. Then I take some other patch, E2, this patch. Here the electric field is different. It's called E2, it's not E1. So it's a different patch, different electric field, denoted by a different symbol, E2, indexed by the subscript, and I find the electric field's dot product with the area of this patch. So I'm not taking into account that the electric field is constant. It's changing in space. And at each patch I find the electric field locally. What's the electric field on patch 1? I take its dot product to the small patch. What's the electric field at point 162? I find the electric field at patch 162 and take its dot product with the area of patch 162 and add up all these products over the entire area and get the flux through the area. So I'm not assuming the electric field to be constant. Alright, I have to move on slightly. I'll answer your questions in a while. So this is the field, the flux through a surface in arbitrary space. Now let's consider a point charge, and we're inching towards the Gauss's law now. Suppose I have a point charge plus Q. I draw a hypothetical sphere around this point charge. Now you have to pay really close attention. I draw a hypothetical sphere. There are now no spheres in space, but I draw one just for my satisfaction, for my mathematical curiosity. And that sphere has a center that coincides with this point charge. So this is a hypothetical sphere that I draw at a radius r. The question is, I would like to find the flux through this sphere due to this point charge. This point charge will produce an electric field, and what I am interested in is the flux of the electric field through this surface. You understand the question? Alright. Now, this surface is a sphere. It's in 3 dimensions. Alright. Now, I know that the field is spherically symmetric. So, at all points on this surface, the field is constant. It's uniform. This is something I already know. Suppose I take some point P on the surface. Now, I haven't drawn it on the circle because it's 3 dimensional. So, if I draw a sphere, right? This is a sphere, a ball. There are different points on the surface, right? And all of these points are equidistant from the center of the sphere. Okay? So, I have taken one such point P. What's the distance of this point from the charge? It's still up. And what is the direction of the electric field at this point? It's radially outwards. Okay. So the electric field at E, let's call it EP, is radially outwards. Right? It's along the radius. So I can draw a radius and extend this radius outwards. This is the electric field at point P. Now, is this point P any different from any other point that I draw on the surface? No, because of the spherical symmetry. It's a point charge. The charge itself doesn't have a volume, and I'm at equidistant points from the center of the circle, from the point charge. So, I can draw many P's I like. How many P's can I draw? Infinite. All the points on the surface of the sphere are at equal footing. बिल्कुल मसावात है, कोई ऊंचा नीचा बड़ा नहीं. There is no unique point on the surface of a sphere. This is what is meant by spherical symmetry. So all these points P are on equal footing. So I take one such point, I call it P, and I find the electric field at that point, EP. Now what I would like to do, I would like to take a small area, a small patch around this point. Okay, let me call the area delta A. Now this area, I have to define a vector. So what's the direction of this vector? आप बताओ इस वेक्टर की क्या डायरेक्शन होगी इस एरिया वेक्टर? Outward. This area vector is also pointing outwards because this is our convention. So I define a delta A which is pointing outwards. This is my delta A vector at point P. Okay? Because I made a patch that is centered at point P. Now what's the flux through this surface? It's EP dotted with delta AP. This is the flux through the surface. Now if I add up all such surfaces, that is I add up over all possible values of P, that is I take an infinitely large number of P's, which means I take infinitesimally small areas. I can convert this summation into an integration. This becomes E dotted with dA. This is the flux through this hypothetical surface which is at a distance r from the point charge. Such a surface is also called a Gaussian surface. So the total flux through this surface is given by this formula, E dot dA. Now each EA at each patch has to be multiplied by the local area. So you take a local field, take its dot product with the local area and add up over all the areas. Now we know that what we really know is that all the points P are on equal footing, so the field at each P is the same. And what is that field? What is the field at point P? Use the Coulomb's law. What's the field? बताओ field क्या है? आप बताएं येलो शर्ट ये फील्ड क्या है P पे, कितनी फील्ड है? F over Q. I'm not talking about forces. I've distanced myself from forces. I'm talking about electric fields now. What's the field at point P? EP क्या है? Field. कितनी है field? Coulomb's law से 1 over Q over R square with some constant 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught. ठीक है ना? So this field is 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught Q 1 over R square, because this is the distance of the point P from the point charge and it's pointing in a certain direction. What's that direction? Dot R, right? So this is the electric field at point P and I take its dot product with this area. I'm just at point P. I haven't done the integration so far. So I take the dot product with delta A R. Right? Nazar aa raha hai? One over, ध्यान से बातें नहीं, 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught Q over R square, R unit vector, right? This is the electric field at point P. I take its dot product with the area of the patch at P, and that area is simply dA and is pointing in the direction of the radius, pointing outwards. So this is the electric field at the point P, dot product with the area at that patch, right? So this is the flux through the small patch, and then I integrate over the area to get the total flux to the surface. Now, is this a constant? Yes. Q is constant, it's a charge. R is a constant. I'm talking about the flux through the surface that is at a distance R from the center of the sphere. Okay? So everything here is a constant. So the flux becomes 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught with a Q, and with a 1 over R squared comes out of the integral. And what's the dot product of R with itself? It's 1. It's a scalar. Vectors vanish. They annihilate one another. The integral comes out here, and I have to write a dA here. Because this is a small area, and I would like to sum up over all the areas, which means I would like to integrate over the area variable. And what is this equal to? This is the surface area of the sphere, which is at a radius r. What's this surface area? 4 pi r square. So now you can put in variables if you like, if you want to trouble yourself, but this is just the sum of all the patches, right? And it's quite obvious, it's the surface area of this hypothetical Gaussian surface that we draw. And this turns out to be Q into 4 pi r squared over 4 pi epsilon naught r squared. The r square cancels out, right? This is really lucky that the r square cancels out. Something we're really lucky. And we're also lucky that the 4 pi cancels out. So putting a 1 over 4 pi factor in the original version of the Coulomb's law is helpful because it helps us in subsequent cancellations. So when we're talking about SI units, we put in a 1 over 4 pi factor, and it turns out to be a fortuitous choice because the 4 pi cancels out here. And we left out with a simple Q over epsilon naught. So I give you half a minute or 1 minute to be silent and think about this, and we'll look at its interpretation. That's okay. All right, I can take a couple of questions. पीछे आप पूछे, पूछिए कोई। ये वाला एरिया, ये वाला, अभी मैंने इस सरफेस, ये एक छोटे पैच का एरिया, अभी मैंने इंटीग्रेट करना है, यहाँ पे मैंने किया नहीं है इंटीग्रेट। This is integration over the area. I mean, you can ignore this for the time being. आप पूछे। देखो, you take the electric field at any point. It can be different from point to point. You find the dot product of that local field with the local area. So we're taking into account the variation of the electric field as well. So for define each such dot product which is different from point to point and then add up over the entire surface that we wish to integrate. So this is a variable of integration. But E can also be variable and the area is also variable. So the variable of integration is just the area. We would like to find out these fluxes over the entire area of the surface. So the variable of integration is we move from point to point on the surface of the surface, right? All right. So this is a really remarkable result. अब तवज्जो से सुने, अब हमने कोई इंटरप्रिटेशन करनी है। We have found the flux through a hypothetical surface which is centered at the point charge. I draw this point charge again. I draw a sphere of radius r. The flux through this surface is Q over epsilon naught. This is the flux through the surface. I draw another sphere of a larger radius. This radius, suppose, is R2. Let's suppose this radius is R1. So the flux through this Gaussian surface is Q over epsilon naught. If I were to replace R1, R by R1 or R2, I would get the same result. The result is independent of the radius. So the flux through this surface is also Q over epsilon naught. Let me draw another sphere. The flux through this surface is also going to be Q over epsilon naught. Okay. Now why is the flux independent of how far are you from the point charge? Right. Right. There's a mathematical reason. The mathematical reason is that the field falls off as 1 over r squared. But the area of this surface is proportional to r squared. Right? 4 pi r squared. So these effects cancel out. This is the mathematical reason. Question. If Coulomb's law were incorrect, if we did not have an inverse square law dependence, would the electric flux through a surface depend upon how far are you from the point charge? Yes. If Coulomb law were not an inverse square law, if electrostatic interactions were not 1 over r square dependent, then the flux through the surface would depend upon how far you are out from the point charge. So the beauty of Coulomb's law is that it's an inverse square dependence, and that makes the flux piercing through this surface independent of r. Now let's look at an example. If you have very fond of bullets and pistols and arms, so suppose this were some kind of shooting range in which bullets were being fired equally in all directions. In other words, bullets were being fired in a spherically symmetric fashion. So if you stand here on this surface and count the number of bullets that pass per unit time through this surface, it's going to be the same as the number of bullets that pass through this blue Gaussian surface per unit time. It's going to be the same as the number of bullets that pass through this green Gaussian surface per unit time, if the bullets are not projectiles that are moving straight. Or if this were a light source, the number of photons, if there were no absorption of light in between, the number of photons that pass through this Gaussian surface per unit time would be the same as the number of photons that pass through this Gaussian surface per unit time. There is nothing in this space that can absorb the photons or absorb the bullets. There is no other charge inside this region that can make the electric field lines disappear. If you look at this example that we've drawn here, the electric field lines are starting somewhere and they are ending somewhere. So this is a source of lines, right? So electric field lines emanate from the source. They ray out from the source. And this is a sink. Electric field lines just fall into this sink, like water falling into a whirlpool and it disappears. You don't know where the water goes. So this is a source and a sink. So if there were no sink, the number of electric field lines per unit passing through this sphere is going to be the same as the number of electric field lines passing through this sphere. It's going to be the same as the number of electric field lines passing through any other sphere, because there is no source or sink of charges. Oh, sorry, there's no sink for charges in this. There's no sink for the electric field in this particular case. If you had a situation like this, in which there were no charges inside, and you would like to find out the electric flux to this surface. It's a closed surface, it has an inside, and if there are no charges inside this volume, what is the flux to this surface? What is the flux to the surface? There are no charges inside this sphere-shaped object. Zero. Because as many field lines entering this surface, so many field lines going out of the surface. Because the field lines cannot sink somewhere, they cannot be annihilated somewhere inside this sphere-shaped object. They cannot disappear. There are no charges inside this object which can act as sinks for field lines. And there are no sources inside this sphere-shaped object which can act as sources of fields. So whatever field line comes in has to go out. अली ये जरा चला दें, ठीक है? यहाँ तक बात समझ आ गई। अब मैं एक सवाल आपसे ले सकता हूँ जी। बिल्कुल जा सकते। But that does not mean that the electric field is the same at this point as it is at this point. The electric field is indeed changing with 1 over r square. Remember this, the flux is constant, it's independent of the radius, but the intensity of the electric field or the field is varying as 1 over r square. Yes?
What tells us how tightly squeezed are the electric lines? So that they are more tightly squeezed and more to pass through them.
It depends upon the surface charge density, but we're going to look at plenty of problems of this kind. Okay? Alright. Now, what I would like to show you that after 5 minutes is something different, but I would like to pick up another important point. You don't have to look at the projector because this is going to take 4 or 5 minutes. In the meantime, I have something really interesting for you. Suppose I have a point charge. अब इसको बड़ी तवज्जो से देखना है. I have a point charge plus q. I have a sphere of radius r. I know what the flux through this sphere is, through the Gaussian sphere is. right? It's q over epsilon naught. It's the charge inside this sphere divided by epsilon naught. Okay, it's independent of the radius. Now suppose I pick up some other surface that is outside this surface. A pear-shaped surface, like a boomerang or an airfoil. This is the cross section of an aeroplane's wing. It's spherical here, but then it just becomes ovoid or it elongates, and this is the kind of shape that I would like to focus on. Now this is also a Gaussian surface, but it's not spherical. This charge is producing a spherically symmetric electric field, no doubt, but the surface that is enclosing this charge is no longer spherical. Now suppose I take a small area. Now you have to pay close attention to this. I take a small area, small a, on this smaller Gaussian surface, on this spherical Gaussian surface. And then what I do next is, if this were a light source, suppose this were a light source, this is a patch, it will produce a shadow on the outer surface. Okay? So what will that shadow look like? I just connect the perimeter of the edges of this patch to the source, and I will get some area here. Capital, let's call this area capital A. Alright? Now is this capital A the same as this area? No. They are different. Do you understand what the visualization? Do you visualize this? So this area is different. Now what I'm interested in is finding out the flux through the area capital A. Right, we have to find that out. Is it the same? The flux through the area, through this area, is going to be the electric field at this area, electric field here. The electric field here is not the same as the field here, because there is 1 over r square dependence. So it's equal to EA times the area A. Now this area vector, is this parallel to the electric field? The area vector here is pointing normally outward because this is a sphere, and the electric field is also pointing outwards. It's pointing along this. But for this area vector can point in an arbitrary direction, right? Because it's not a sphere. But the electric field at this point is still pointing along the radius. If I connect this point to this point, I draw a radius, the electric field is still pointing radially outwards. So now there is some angle that has been acquired between this big area and the electric field at this point. Correct? So I have a cosine theta factor here. ये बात समझ आई? ये रिपीट कर देता हूँ. Now suppose this is a sphere and I elongate one surface, one side of the sphere and stretch it. So this is like a rubber band. The rubber band is on a wheel, it's spherical, but I just pick up one end of the rubber band and stretch it and peg it here, right? So I have deformed the sphere into an ovoid of this kind. Okay? You understand what I've done? Alright. Now on the sphere, the electric field is spherically outwards. It's along the direction of the radius. And this area is also spherically outward. It's along the radius because this is a sphere. At this point, the electric field is radially outwards, but the area vector is not radially outward. The area is pointing in some other direction. And how do I know that direction? I take this point, find the normal to the tangent of this curve, and I get the area vector. So this area vector now acquires a certain angle with the electric field theta. So if I were to calculate the flux through this patch, I would have a cosine theta factor. Now do you understand? Is it clear? Silence means half-heartedness. Is it clear? Got it. So this is the flux through this area, and this surface is no longer spherical. Now, if I know the electric field at this point, do I know what the electric field is going to be at this point? It's just going to be small r. So this is small r. Suppose this distance is capital R. It's just going to be small r divided by capital R squared. Correct? Because there's an inverse square dependence. So this E capital A is going to be E small a, and it is diminished by a factor. Okay? ये field पहले तय. Will this field be smaller than this field? Yes. And what's the factor by which it will be smaller? It will be smaller by the square of the ratio of these distances. Correct? And this is what I've done here. So this EA is actually equal to small e at small a into the square of this factor. What about capital A? This area is clearly not the same as this area. Yeah, we're talking about the area here, not the angular area, not the solid angle. So this capital A is larger than this small a. How large? This is small a multiplied by capital R over small r squared. Is that enough? Is that enough? It's not enough. If this were a sphere, then this would be enough. But this is not a sphere. So this angle is larger by a factor of 1 over cosine theta. Which means that if this theta were 0, which means that this were also the surface of a sphere, then the ratio would be equal to A into small capital R over small r square, because the surface of a sphere has a 4 pi r square dependence. But this is no longer a sphere. In other words, if I take this surface area, I take a small patch on this point and I extend this point, this area is much larger than this area. And how large? It's larger by a factor of 1 over cosine theta. So there is a 1 over cosine theta factor here, and this cosine theta factor comes here. So this is the flux at capital A at this point in this patch. And if I work out the algebra, this cosine theta goes away, this factor goes away, and I'm left with EA into small a. And this is just the flux through this patch. So the flux through this patch is going to be the same as the flux through this patch. And this means that I do not have to choose a Gaussian surface. I can choose a Gaussian surface that is spherical, or I can choose a surface that is of arbitrary shape. And the flux through any such surface, phi, is going to be equal to the charge inside the surface divided by epsilon naught. And this is the Gauss's law. Now I have a demonstration for you. We'll have more to say about this law on Monday. Remember, on Friday, there's going to be a recitation. I'm not available on Friday, so I'll take up the recitation time for the next lecture. Now, what I would like to show you here is, hopefully, and hopefully it works, I would like to show you how to generate a voltage that is probably of the order of 0.1 million volts. And I would like to show how such a voltage can be generated without friction, just by electromagnetic induction. वो देखो, अब मैं भी करता हूँ. देखो, आपने ये तो देखा होगा कि फ्रिक्शन की वजह से चार्जेस जनरेट होते हैं. ठीक है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इफ आई हैव दिस रबर शीट, वेरी सिंपल डेमोन्स्ट्रेशन. Okay, I don't know if it's going to work, but if I have this rubber sheet, I rub it on my hair. Okay, I don't know if it's going to work. Probably you can't see my hair stand up. Oh no, it's too difficult. Alright, just forget about this. But let me show you this extra large voltage that appears on this machine. This machine was designed about 100 years ago, and it's called the Wim-Schurz machine. And it does not use friction. It just uses electrostatic induction. That is, a charge on one object induces a charge on a nearby object. And if that charge is large enough, it builds up a voltage. And if that voltage is large enough, it can make the air, that is an insulator, into a conductor. Let me try this out and see if it works, because these are very temperamental experiments. All electrostatic experiments are temperamental, moody hote hain. If there is humidity in the air, they don't work. Let me see if it works at this particular point. Let me try to heat this up a little bit so that the moisture goes away. Let me just try it. My last try. If it doesn't work, I'll upload a video, because it was working 1 hour ago. Probably it's too humid in the class. It's too much of God's law. Alright, let me see. Last try. That's why I wrote this. Sorry folks, I'll give it another try and hope to see you on Monday again.